the Moneyweb Crypto Podcast, where we discuss all things crypto related. Your host, Kieran Ryan.
Online scams are getting more creative by the day, whether it's crypto or online stock trading. A Moneyweb reader sent us his social media interactions from an online company called TradeFT that offered to turn 4,500 Rand into 20,000 Rand in 1 month. We, of course, advised him to run. There are literally hundreds of similar websites that look professional, but when you go and look at the trading license, there's nothing to show. AI has been a huge gift to these scammers. Once you turn your 4,500 Rand into 20,000 Rand, you're then enticed to invest another 20,000 Rand and turn that maybe into 100,000 Rand within another few weeks. What makes this scary is that social media advertising uses AI-generated content of Elon Musk or Cyril Ramaphosa seeming to endorse the investment. We've had several Moneyweb readers who lost millions this way. Then, when they want to withdraw, they're told to pay more because of SARS taxes or to lift holding fees. They'll give any kind of name to these fees that have got to be paid. The point being that they're getting very sophisticated at this. We're joined now by Gerard van Deventer, Head of Enforcement at the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, to dig into some of the recent trends in scams. Hi, Gerard. Thanks again for your time. I see the FSCA is putting out statements almost daily on scammers impersonating legitimate businesses and individuals. All of these with the aim of trying to get people to part with their money. Give us an idea and bring us up to date on some of the more recent trends being used by these scammers, if you would.
Yeah, Kiran, thank you very much for the opportunity. The more we get this message out, of course, the better. And I appreciate, contributions from the media. So you're absolutely right. It has become much more sophisticated. It's not one of those things that you can spot a mile away anymore. And that is, of course, a great issue. And that's a big risk to the public. And you're right about the impersonations. That plays a big role. So a part of that impersonations are, of course, the highly sophisticated deepfake videos about well-known people. And but not just well-known people, also people like our commissioner, in fact, was targeted as well a while ago. And you can make those people say whatever you want. But the whole thing around impersonations, there's a much more quicker and easier way that these scammers work and get results. And that is that they basically impersonate financial advisors, financial services providers with a license, with an FSP license from the FSCA. So every time we warn the public, we say, please don't do business with somebody that don't have a license. That's not regulated by us. So what they do is they just take that license and they take a mutation of that name, and they place that on social media, and there you go. So, the trick really is, and you mentioned the unrealistic return. The trick really for the public is to completely stay away from social media offers for investments and to completely stay away from unrealistic returns. That is the big issue. There's a lot of other red flags, but if you can do that, you're going to be okay. And this is where this is going. Last week, we had somebody impersonating my predecessor. It wasn't just job before. And as I say, it's really sophisticated. So there's no way of telling. But to give you an idea, the last financial year, we started 767 new cases, and 665 of those were actually what we called unregistered business. So to put that in perspective, when the FSCA, talk about unregistered business, it's because we only look at contraventions of financial sector law. So in our world, it's unregistered business. But you can read into that scams, impersonations, investment schemes, that is a big problem. But if you just look at this financial year, so this is from 1 April this year to date, we received 221 new cases, and 187 of those fall into that same category. So it is all over the place. Everybody will be approached and everybody must really, really be very careful about it. The best thing is to, if you get an offer that you think looks good, phone the actual FSP, the actual financial advisor, on a phone number that you found yourself, and then check. And I'm sure they will advise you that you're looking in the wrong place. I have to say this, Kieran, unrealistic return, there's no doubt that that is the number one red flag. But you can actually turn that sentence around. And I can tell you this, in the 30 years I've been doing this, I've never seen an unrealistic return case that's not some form of a scam, either partly or wholly a scam. So, yeah, that's the big warning.
I guess it requires a huge staff when you've got, just since April, something like 250 cases that have been brought to your attention. That's not easy. And the thing is, they're getting very convincing, with the AI generated content. Elon Musk is standing in front of you. He seems to be talking. It looks so realistic. And then Cyril Ramaphosa comes up and he seems to be endorsing this as well. Or somebody from the FSCA. This is quite dangerous territory, isn't it? Because most people are not aware this is AI-generated content.
That is so true. If you deal with a man in the street, they cannot fathom that that technology has gone this far. And I've really reached the point in my life where I don't believe anything and I don't reply to anything. And sometimes I actually don't reply to valid mails because of this. So I feel sorry for the public, because there's no way for them to escape this except to just stay away from those kind of offers. The bottom line is also a legitimate financial advisor or asset manager is not going to ply his wares on social media. So that's another big point that the public must keep in mind.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, many of the cases that we've seen at Moneyweb, and we are asked to investigate a fair number of these cases, you'll see that, okay, is there an email address? The email address will say something like fsca@gmail. The Gmail address, of course, is the prime giveaway. It was a family member who approached me quite recently about one of these scams, AI-generated scams. Turn your 4,500 Rand into 20,000 Rand in a month. He passed it on to me, and I went and looked at the website. The website's pretty good.
Yeah.
But when under the legal section, you go to the legal section, I want to see what licenses do they have. Where are they licensed to operate? Not a single jurisdiction in the world, certainly not in South Africa. They do have a legal section, but it's got documents like non-disclosure agreements and our internal privacy policy and things like that. So, if you don't know what you're looking for, you can get confused.
So that's an interesting point you're making, and a very valid point. In the old days, you could look at a website, and the giveaway would be that there's no depth in the website. If you click on something like you've explained now, then there's nothing underneath, because it's a two-dimensional website. It is not like that anymore. You can now click on links, and the links are there. If you look at the Bankso case, the license we've just withdrawn, and the AfriMarkets case, this is the license we've just suspended. There were these deepfake videos involved, and if you clicked, it actually passed you on to the entities. So that's also not a test anymore. There are now depth in these websites, so that's the point of them being a lot more sophisticated. And of course, once again, a person offering to provide that type of return, that's the first point. And the second point is that guarantees your return. There is, you're not, if you have a license with the FSCA, you're not going to have it for long, because that's simply misleading. You can never guarantee a return, and you certainly cannot offer a return like that. On what would you ever base it on? So yes, I'm not surprised that you didn't find an FSCA license there, but I'm very relieved you didn't find an FSCA license there, because, even licensed entities go astray.
Yeah. Well, then I went and had a look at the FSCA website, and I put in the company name, and it came up with no return. So then I was able to give my family member some pretty solid advice to stay away from this. I want to talk about CFD trading. CFD is contracts for difference. That's a type of derivative contract that allows traders to bet on movement of stock and crypto prices. So if you're buying a CFD on a stock like Apple, you're not really buying Apple shares, but you are able to buy the price movement in Apple shares. Now, this has become the most common way for people to do online trading in South Africa and around the world. Traders are always advised to put in stop losses, to limit losses when the trade goes against them. But we've had a few complaints from people being stopped out of these trades when the market didn't actually touch the stop loss levels that they'd put in place. Are you aware of this at the FSCA, and are you able to help them when this happens? Or is there any monitoring of this kind of thing?
So I think, that to start off with, Kieran, is that the very important thing is those traders need to have an FSCA license. It's a financial product, a derivative. CFD is a derivative. It's a financial product. And if they tell you that they don't need a license, then you need to walk away very quickly. That's the first thing. The second thing is, because they have an FSCA license, they are subject to certain codes of conduct. And closing out a position of a client when they shouldn't is certainly a problem. It can be as innocent as a systems problem, or it can be as serious as the first red flag, that one of these traders are not doing what they're supposed to do. And I'll maybe just spend a minute explaining the relationship between that trader or that FSP, financial services provider, and the actual product provider behind it, the so-called ODP, over-the-counter derivative provider. So the trader is the FSP. He only provides a service and advice, perhaps. That CFD that you mentioned is issued by an ODP license holder, which is fairly new in South Africa. We required them to register only a few years ago. And there's quite a few registered ODPs in South Africa, and then of course in other countries. But here's the problem. An FSP can do business with a regulated ODP in South Africa or in another jurisdiction that's properly regulated. And then there's lots of checks and balances and risk management for the client at the other end. One of the issues that we are focusing on at the moment that's quite a problem is that these FSPs apply for a license and they provide us with an ODP that's well regulated, South African or not, but well regulated. And then the moment that our licensing team are off their backs, they change ODPs. And that's where the problem comes in, Kiran. So they would change their ODP to an ODP domiciled in a jurisdiction where financial services are not regulated. So it's one thing to be an ODP in the United Kingdom. You're going to be very well regulated and you're going to have codes of conduct. But if you're an ODP that's registered and domiciled in the Bahamas or St. Vincent and the Grenadines, that's a completely different story. Not only are there no codes of conduct, there's no risk management, but it's also very difficult for us to reach out and do an investigation, find out what is going on. So that's a major problem. So the first question that public should ask the FSP, the broker, the advisor is, who's your ODP? Where is it? Where is it domiciled? And if it's not domiciled in a properly regulated jurisdiction, then walk away and tell the FSCA about it. So that's the first part of my answer. As I say, report it to the FSCA immediately. What will we do? So if it's a case of the broker or the service provider not doing what they're supposed to do, that would be something that my colleagues in the supervision division would be interested in. So you can just imagine how that happens. One complaint is something they'll look at, but if 2, 3, 4 complaints, now it becomes an issue. So they would step up and they would engage with that FSP and say, well, there's these complaints. What is going on? Is there a problem with your systems? You need to fix it, etc., etc. It can, however, be a red flag for something more serious, and that is when my division, enforcement, will be involved. And then we will, try to get to a point as quickly as possible where we can warn the public if there is an issue. And that type of activity, I have to say, unfortunately, when I look back at our cases that ended up as massive frauds at the end of the day, it starts like this, Kiran. It starts with somebody not being paid out when they are supposed to be paid out. And there's always an excuse and a reason. So I know you're talking about something slightly different. You're talking about closeouts. But as I say, it starts with a systems problem. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes it ends with millions or billions missing and us kicking those people out of the industry.
I think that's how Mirror Trading International went down when they stopped answering requests for withdrawals. Up to that point in December 2020, I think everything was going fine. You could ask for withdrawal. And then Johann Steinberg had skipped the country, gone to Brazil, and nobody was getting any money. And of course, the whole pack of cards came down at that point.
You're so right. We still hold the dubious honor of having had and investigated the biggest crypto scam in the world, and that is mirror trading that you're talking about. I'd rather not be the Guinness Book of Records on that one, but what can we do? So that is exactly so. When this pyramid starts crumbling, then there's always excuses about systems being down and people not getting paid out and so forth. But of course, unfortunately, by then it is too late. The scam has run its course, or nearly run its course, and there will be money missing. Incidentally, in mirror trading, the liquidators found billions of crypto and brought it back. I don't know how much of that the victim saw, but that was one of the few success stories in actually recovering assets.
Yes. Let's just stay on the crypto subject. It's been more than a year since CASP licenses were introduced. That's Crypto Asset Service Provider licenses. Last time I looked, there were about 250 of these licenses. We've learned quite a bit about the crypto sector over that time, no doubt. What can you tell us about, how many licenses are there, and is the crypto sector behaving itself?
Well, and we're certainly still learning a lot about that. One of my goals and objectives in terms of business planning, etc., for the year is to build up that expertise internally and externally, so that we can do those investigations in a team that understands what they're doing. So we do it at the moment, and we go outside if we don't have that expertise. But I would like to see that growth in the FSCA, specifically in investigations and enforcement. So we are now at 268 licenses. So it's slowly growing. I think not as fast as in the beginning, which means there are more CASPs in South Africa that you can trade with than you need. So the message to the public is quite simple, is stick with those with licenses. Please stick with those with licenses. So it's interesting that you're asking whether they behave. I expected when we declared that a financial product and we said, and now you will be licensed, I expected, and this is my nature because of my work. And I suspect you're very much in the same position that you would always be skeptical about how this is going to go down. I expect there to have been a wave of unregistered business. So we started off as you and I spoke about before, by taking everybody that's registered at the Financial Intelligence Center as a CASP, and we compared that list with our application for license list, and that was the beginning of our investigation list. Then we added all licenses that are declined, we add to that list. And then in addition to that, we also have an active social media platform monitoring program where if those kind of words come up that will indicate that you're dealing in CASPs, that will add to the investigation list. So we've got a list. I think we're now at 36 cases, of which 22 we have closed already, and there's another 14 under investigation. So the good news is that looking at those cases, and I dedicated a specific team to this because I really expect this wave of unregistered business. The good news is that I haven't seen that wave, Kiran. So I don't know if I'm just missing it, but I haven't seen it. And I absolutely encourage the public to tell us about it if they see it. But it seems like in most cases, those people who did not apply for a license, whose license was declined, either hooked up with a licensed entity or stopped doing business or never got off the ground doing business. So I think we're going to be okay on that front. I think it's just very important also to remember that this is not derivative trading, of course. Massive problem in the derivative trading market. And that's the things we've been talking about. This is actual crypto trading. So fiat from crypto and crypto to fiat. And if I had to comment on that, especially the big players in the market in South Africa, they've been very cooperative and they've actually been very helpful in investigations and workshops and so forth. You know, if you look at Luno and so forth, good relationship with them as an enforcement division, and you could understand we don't make a lot of friends. And of course, we sometimes need to trace crypto, and that's where they come in as well. So I think all over, I'm pleasantly surprised with how they're behaving.
Well, that's good to hear. I noticed from the number of FSCA warnings coming out, and you publishing these notices pretty much daily, certainly a number of times a week. One of the big issues is funeral policies that are being sold and they're not registered. What's going on here?
Yeah, so that's a not only an historical issue. I think it's also a socio-economic issue. It's lots of funeral parlors, thousands of funeral parlors across the country in the rural areas, and they fulfill a very important role in that they provide funeral. They actually provide funerals, and that's the trick. That is fine. That's very good that they do that. The problem is when they start providing funeral cover instead of funerals. So that is all about receiving monthly contributions. Now, if you're a lawyer, you would call that premium, insurance premium. And then that is in exchange, of course, for providing the funeral when the time comes. The record keeping is very basic. It's not a sophisticated, high technical record keeping. So what happens there is traditionally this is how the funeral parlors operated, and we need to bring that back to you are actually conducting unregistered insurance, and you don't have the risk systems for that. You don't have the deep pockets for that if something goes wrong. So you need to keep your funeral parlor business, but you need to leave the collection to the insurance companies or to an FSP. And that is what we're working very hard on. And it's not just an enforcement drive. It's actually also a supervision effort. It's also a education effort. We're busy with a big project together with the Prudential Authority. The enforcement contribution to that is we find these parlors and we provide them with an opportunity to regularize. And if they do, we then give them an enforceable undertaking. But you can't do that one funeral parlor at a time. So we need to find that bigger solution to deal with it. So you will see, especially if you look at our regulatory actions report for the last financial year, you'll see a lot of these cases ending up in an enforceable undertaking. It's a more softer approach. But that's not all. You will also see it end up in massive penalties, in debarments, and in directives. So the difference between a funeral parlor being on the one side of that fence or the other side is cooperation. If my team arrives there and there's cooperation, we help them to regularize, that's fine. But if there's no cooperation, then we default to enforcement the way enforcement is done. But there's been a lot of progress, and I think if I can mention one progress that I'm the most happy about is a change in attitude from the funeral parlor associations. I think they actually came around now and understand the need for this. And we're getting a lot of cooperation from them, and that really helps us a lot.
We're going to leave it there. That was Gerard van Devent, Head of Enforcement at the Financial Sector Conduct Authority. Thanks very much, Gerard.
Thanks for listening to the Moneyweb Crypto Podcast, hosted by Kieran Ryan. To listen to our other podcasts, go to moneyweb.co.za or the Moneyweb app and follow Moneyweb News for daily updates.